So let's talk about the view model, movie list view model. Okay. So one of the things I'd done at the beginning that I'd done kind of a while ago, remember that I have these strings here, right? I have a string for an error message, I have a string for a snack bar message. Does everybody see that? Okay. So there's a problem here in that those really need to be translated. Okay. Those really do need to be translated to the user. But in the view model, do I have access to a context? No, and I shouldn't. Okay. In the view model, you should not have access to the context. In fact, if you look at my notes, we're down here. There's a blog by one of the Android developers I would really recommend taking a look at, locale changes in the Android View platform, that talks about this. Basically, one of the things to understand is when you change the device's language, it causes what we call a configuration change. Okay, configuration change is also a screen rotation. Like if you turn the screen between landscape or portrait, that is a configuration change. Locale is the same way. What that means is it will cause, when you return to the app from the settings screen, it will cause that activity to be destroyed and then recreated. But the view model does not get destroyed and recreated. Okay, so the view model will still have whatever language is in there if you keep strings in there. Does that make sense? You would still have English text in there instead of switching it all over to Spanish text. So the crux of it, and TLDR, basically needed to use IDs instead of strings. Right? So we need to do the translation part in the activity, and the view model is just determining which message to show from a list of predetermined messages. Does that make sense? So that means from the view models, there's a little bit more refactoring that needs to be done. So namely these, anytime you have these mutable live data as you're trying to show a message to the user, this now needs to be an integer instead of a string. Okay? Now, while I'm at it, this is a really good time to address the fix me. What happens if there's multiple errors on the screen at once? Right?
So we really need an error for each particular distinct case.
Right. Everything that can generate an error needs its own piece of live data, right? So if I'm looking at the movie list, right, what I need to look at and determine is what are the things that could fail, right? So if I look in here, right, we're doing a bunch of queries, right? I'm querying for, let me go into movies. I'm querying for the list of movies, whatever list that ends up being. I am querying for the votes, and I'm also querying for the genres, right? Any of those database queries could fail, right? And in fact, they could fail independently, or they could fail simultaneously. Does that make sense, everybody? They could fail together, or they could fail separately, okay? And so the problem with that is that they're running asynchronously. They're running simultaneously. They're running concurrently at the same time. So if I try to put those into one place, I'm kind of making certain presumptions, right? It makes it very hard to reset that error message back to null because I don't know if just me fixing the issue, if this thing's succeeding, that something else hasn't failed. Does that make sense? So to really sort it out, I do need 3 at least different error messages for this screen. Does that make sense? Because I have 3 different database queries. Yep.
What does that mean about the snack bar though?
The snack bar I can only ever show one. Right? The snack bar I can only ever show one snack bar. So I don't really need distinct ones for that,
Okay.
right? Snack bar is easier because I just show it and it goes away, right? So that's different, right? There can really only be one on screen. So I'm okay with just having one live data for that. It wouldn't be a way to handle multiple. But there is a need to have multiple for this. Okay. So one way I could spit that out is I could break that up into, now I would have 4 of these for 4 different error messages. 3 error messages, 1 snack bar. Okay? Another way I could think about this is I could think about this as maybe a map, right? I could say, okay, it's a map with 4 keys, right? There's a genres error, there's a genres key, there's a snack bar key, there's a whatever key, you know, I could put in a map with an error for each, right? The other way I could handle this is with a list. I could say, maybe I do need to support different snack bars simultaneously. I could try a list of messages or a list of errors, right? Okay. If I went to a list of snack bars, that enables me to do something like, okay, show a snack bar, wait till it's shown and then show the next thing. Show a snack bar, wait until that's shown and show the next thing. Which could be really helpful if I do get into a case where I need multiple snack bars to be shown. Does that make sense? So that one actually would make more sense if this was a list. Cool. All right. So while we're at it, let's make that change. Since we're going to refactor this class, let's go ahead and make that change. So this is going to be a list of integers. Okay. Now, if I went to a list of integers here for the error messages, would that handle the case where there are multiple errors? That would then resolve the issue of what if multiple things fail?
Only if we're consistent about which item in the list is which position.
But I don't know that. If I'm just adding and removing,
Yeah.
I don't know that,
So
right?
it's not consistent.
I'd have to say, if I was going to do that, then I need to say, hey, the list is always 4 items long, and then set and, read and set index 0, 1. I wouldn't be able to use the add and remove methods. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
I can't just add and remove things willy-nilly. Okay. What are my options? Other options?
Just use a map.
Maybe go to a map, right? Maybe I go to the map and say, hey, here's the things that could fail. So if I say map, maybe it's a map from string to integer, right? So I say, the key is the thing that could fail, and the value is the message that we want to show, right? And I might go ahead and pluralize this because this is now messages and messages. These are both plural, right? I've got a map of error message and I've got a list of snack bar messages. Okay? So how does this then factor in? All right, so I create the live data. I just need to add the S. That's the only change there. They're switched over. When I go down, I'm going to jump down to the getters first. Okay. So this is now get error messages and get snack bar messages. This is now a list of strings. This is a map string to integer. What did you say?
They're a list of integers.
Oh, right. Yes, they are a list of integers. So error messages and snack bar messages. Okay. So those are switched on. Okay. Now, when I say this method I previously had added a method to clear the snack bar, right? To say, okay, we've shown that message. Now I need to remove that message from the list, right? Now, this changes because I don't want to remove all of the messages once I've seen them. I just want to remove the last one. Does that make sense? Or sorry, the first one, right? So we show the first one in the list. We'll then remove it from the list and show the next one. Okay. So here, this would need to be something of the order, like, if I'm going to do that, then this needs to be snack bar message. Okay, so let's get, we've got a list of integers. So we get the messages out. Messages. So let's get what the current value is. I would need to then remove the first one, because we just showed the first one. And then I need to basically post it back to tell it that it's updated. So that's how I would need to refactor this so that it just shows, so it just removes the first one from the list. Does that make sense? There's some complaint here in that this could be null. So I do need to check that if messages does not equal null, then I can clear it. Otherwise, there's nothing to clear.
You know you want to remove the first index.
Because I know that I want to show them in the order that they've been posted.
Okay.
Right? I know I want to show the snack bars in the order that they occurred, right? So the first one in the list, I'm saying, would be the oldest one, okay? And so I might do something like this too. I might say public void, and maybe I'm going to change this even to say remove snack bar and add snack bar. So effectively I need to integer message or message ID. So I put that in. I can in here help a little bit, so I can say that this has to be a string res. That says it has to be a string resource, so that can help hint you as to what it needs to be. So I can make this message and I can say, hey, let's kind of do the same thing. Pull it out. In this case, if it is null, then I need to make a list. So messages is equal to a new array list. And then finally, messages dot add so add one to the end of the list, tell the front end that there's an update. Here I remove one from the beginning of the list and tell it it's an update. So it's basically a queue, right? Is really what I want here is a queue. Does that make sense? We pull the first one out, we put it in at the end of the line, and then we pull it out at the beginning of the line. Okay. So, all right, so we've got that, and I could have used a queue in here as well. I'm just keeping it as a list because we're familiar with lists. What else? Error messages. So similarly with error message, I might want to have another method here. I might say public void set error or set error message, and this would be kind of the same thing. Set a message ID. And so what I want to do is kind of pull the messages out. It's a map from string. I need to check if that's null. So if it's null, I need to create a new map. A new hash map. Messages put, and I still need a key, so string key message ID and error messages dot post value messages. Does that make sense? So now I have a way to set a particular message within that map easily. And that way I don't have to reproduce this code in multiple places. Okay? Now, one thing you might be hemming and hawing yourself and thinking about. Okay? I just added some code. Okay? I added this to one view model. How many view models do I have in this project? A few. Right? Part of the benefit of doing it this way is the way I've written this, especially with the map, isn't really dependent on which screen it's on, right? If I did multiple live datas, then I'm going to have to change that code for every screen I put it into. But I might be able to get away with, okay, I've got code that's here. Maybe there's a way that we can reuse this rather than typing it again and again and again, right? Okay, so keep that in your back of your head. I'm going to finish up making the changes to this view model, and then we can talk about what we can do to make this less of a burden. Does that make sense? Because no, you don't need to write this again and again and again. You just need to think about how do you avoid writing it again and again and again. But I always find the quickest way to get there first is to try to do it once, work through all the bugs, and then figure out how, and then once I've done that, it's easier at that point to figure out how to generalize it. But until it's working, it's not necessarily a good time to generalize it yet. Okay? So get it working first before you generalize it. So let's say going down and looking. So all this, there's some code I need to change up here. So I'm going to jump up to here. Okay? So in this case, votes registration. Okay? If there was an error here, does everybody see that? That's one place where I need to show one of the error messages. Okay? So I want to extract this error getting votes. It is, what happened? There it goes. One thing to be fair forewarned here, if I had done this, just for demonstration purposes, if I'd done this here, there's really no way for me to translate this. You're just up a creek without a paddle. Because what I'm saying is I want this thing as a string, I can't run that through my translation process. It's already in English, okay? The thing to understand here is that message that comes from an exception is generally not user-friendly anyway, okay? So I don't really need to go down the route of trying to translate the error message that's in the exception, We should just assume that's good for developers. I want to log it like I'm doing here. I'm logging it to the console, but I don't really want to show that to the user. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yeah.
So I don't want to use that, and I don't want to do the toString method on that either. So I want to come up with, wherever these errors occur, you want to come up with a custom message for it, which I've already done. And then I'm going to extract that. Okay, so that's going to be error fetching votes. Okay. When that extracts, it's going to be a little bit non-useful, okay? Because it's expecting you to have a context, but remember we don't have a context, and we have no way to call getString from this place, from the vmon. Is everybody on board with that? So even though it's translating and it's trying to ask for you to put context there, what we're actually going to do is we're going to cut all that stuff off, and we're going to use the method that we just created, which is set error message. I'm going to pass in my key, so this would be like movie votes. I would just go by the collection. Movie vote. And so we're going to set the movie vote error to this key. So I'm just using the ID there, right? It's as an ID of the string, not the string itself. So what I need to do is everywhere I have these errors or these snack bars, I need to switch over to this new kind of approach. So here in set error message, here I'm setting an error message. Here, error fetching genres. And what did I call it up here? Yes, I did call it error. Okay. So error fetching genres. Set error message. So that's going to go all the way down here. Set error message. I need to provide a key. So that's going to be genres and that. And last but not least, I have a few error messages down here. So where I go to adding votes, error extracting user visible strings. So here, I'm just showing a snack bar. Extract string resource, error, save, vote. Save, vote. Saved. Okay, that's extracted. That's here. That's here. Okay, so these are going to be stack bars. Add stack bar. Add stack bar. Okay, so I'm switching those things over. Those are still stack bars. And so I can take the fix me off that we did because we took care of that. Similarly here, here remove vote. Escape. There we go. Vote removed. Add stack bar, and so I'm going to add that ID. Add stack bar. I'm going to add that ID. Okay. Finally, we're down here, and this is with movies. So set error message. And so the error message I want to have is the error getting movies. Error fetching movies. So I'm going to set that error message here. Oh, I need a key. Movies. And last, once it's successful, I just need to set that to null. And it looks like I might have messed that up further. So the point I'm getting to is really everywhere I was setting error messages and snack bars, I'm calling these two functions instead. Does that make sense? I'm calling these two functions instead. By the fact of doing that, that potentially makes it easier to extract it and maybe put it into like another class or another object that we could potentially reuse. So those are changed. I think there was one thing up here that I still need to set. Yes. So one of the things that I had done is when we're working with this case, right? So I'm setting the error message in this case that say that there's a problem with the votes, but I also need to set the error message on the other side. If it's successful, I need to clear that particular error, that particular key back out. So here I need to set it to null. So I'm going to put that there. And for genres, similarly, I'm going to put that under, put that there. So put that first. Set error message, and I want to set this to that same key. Genres. Cool. So error case, we set it to this, and then success case, I set it to null. Okay? So it's always being set to something, whatever the pathway is. All right. I still have, I think this, let me see if there's any errors remaining. There's one here where I forgot. I've got an extra, okay, that's all it was, an extra parenthesis. Okay. So if I go back to the activity though, remember I just made a bunch of, or I think this would be the fragment. I just made a bunch of changes on that side. These things are now broken, right? So on the error message side now, on the activity side, I now need to be able to read the new thing. Is everybody tracking with me? Okay. Which means that I need to make some code changes. So let's talk about the error messages first. Okay. So effectively what I want to do is this is going to be get error messages, and this is going to be error messages. Okay. Remember, I now have a map. Okay. I now have a map that I'm receiving of error messages. Is everybody following me? Okay. I can't just call toString and toss that map into this text view. I need to do a little bit of processing, a little bit of work with it. Okay. So what I want to do is I'm going to start by making a string builder. So string builder SB is a new string builder. Okay. I'm going to buffer all the results that I want. And then when I'm done, I'm going to update the particular error, the error text with the text that we generated. So set text and set that to SB. So I'm going to build it out and then spit it into that text view. I can also set the visibility of that error text. I'm going to want to set that based on whether or not there's text. And so that would be if the SB dot length, okay, if there's at least one character in there, then I want to show that error text, and otherwise I want to hide it. Pretty simple, okay? That's also going to allow me to compress a lot of error handling that I would have otherwise had to do by just saying, hey, there should be, it should be visible or not based on whether or not there's anything to show. Okay? So in the interim here, first thing we have to see is, is there a map at all, right? Is this not null? Right? Does that make sense as a first step? Right? Initially, that map is null. It doesn't become non-null right now until the first error message is written. So I do have to cover that case. Another thing I want to be very cautious of, and the reason I'm structuring this, notice that if this is null, it's still going to end up updating the text view, right? So if there ends up that the map is null, then I'm still going to set the text view to empty string, right? I'm still going to clear that. Otherwise, I would have a problem at the end, potentially, if somehow it became null, then I might still be showing old error messages. Okay? So, what can I do here? Thoughts? What do I want to do?
We want to clear the text and then want to set the visibility potentially.
Okay, we've already done that here. All I need to do is build up the message that we want to show, right? Okay. So error messages, okay? Do I know ahead of time what the keys are going to be?
Yeah, you wrote them down already.
Okay. So could I hard code in here movies and votes and genres?
Yeah, you wrote them.
Could, but then what if I want to use this on another screen? Do you see the problem? Right? I could hard code the keys in, but then I have the risk of having typos and I have the need to write this again multiple times, right? If I instead don't hard code in the keys, then I can reuse this code. Does that make sense to everybody? Mm-hmm. Okay. So what I want to do is, this is a case where, sometimes you want to say map.get. If you know the keys ahead of time, here I really don't know them. I just want to go through all of the keys. Okay. So what I would do is I would say, let's do some sort of for loop over that. If you overheard my discussion yesterday or the other day, you might have heard that there are 3 different ways to loop over a map. So I can either loop over the entries, which is the pair of keys and values. I can loop over the keys, which is just be those keys, or I can loop over the values. Okay. Turns out in this case, I don't really care about the keys. All I care about is the values. The values are what I end up showing to the user. Mm-hmm. So you can call entry set, that will give you a collection there. You can call value key set, or you can call values, which is what I'm going to do here. Say values, I'm going to loop over that, integer, message ID, loop over those one by one. And effectively what I want to do is append the appropriate message to that string builder. Okay. Now remember, these are IDs. These aren't the actual string message. So this is the point where I want to convert those over to the translated versions. Does that make sense? So the view model is just dealing with the IDs. Right.
So in this implementation, we're not putting a text view where the error occurred, we're putting it all at the top.
Yes. I could use this same approach, then I would use the keys. If I was putting multiple text views out, then I would just use the keys and I say, hey, get this specific key and put it here. Get this specific key and put it here, right? This approach, I'm saying I'm going to put them all at the top. Okay? So let's say I get string message ID. Okay, so that's going to result in the translated version of that message. Make sense? I've moved the get string from the view model over into the activity. That's the important part, right? We've moved it out of the view model. Also in there, I likely want those to be separated by a new line, so I would probably append here specifically a /n. Does that make sense to everybody? Problem solved. Okay? So that should cover us in terms of moving it over here. Again, this is not the only way to do this, but this is one way you could approach this task, right? This is not the only way you can do this, but it's one way to approach it. Okay. What about the snack bars? So snack bar is a little bit of a different story. Get snack bar messages. Okay. How do I want to handle those? How do I want to handle snack bars?
So we just need to look at the snack bar messages one at a time.
One at a time. Remember, we can only show one, so I'm going to pick the first one and show that. So I would say, okay, let's find out if there are any. So something like this, integer message ID. I need to check a few things. I need to check that the list itself is not null and that the size of it is greater than 0. And check that both of those things are true, right? If it's null or it's empty, then we don't have a message to show. So in that case, I would say we want to get the first one, get 0, and otherwise, we're just going to say this is null. Okay? So if there is a message, I can show that. And then if there's not, I don't need to do anything. Now, one of the things to remember is I want to have it remove the snack bar. And the way I had done it previously, model.remove snack bar, this is going to happen immediately when the snack bar is shown, right? So if I remove it immediately after I show it and there's multiple queued up, what that's going to mean is quickly flips through all of those snack bars before the user has a chance to see them. You following with me? Okay. What I actually like to do is if we can support multiple snack bars, I'd like to be able to see all of the snack bars, which means they need to be up long enough for the user to see them. Okay. So I need to delay the remove until it's basically gone away. Okay. So I seem to remember seeing this in the API. I think it was after the make that I could do this. There it is, add callback. So what you can do, you can say make, add a callback, tell it to do something when it's done, and that's where we can do the bit that we want to do.
Singularly put the double equals 0.
Yep. Snack bar. Add callback. What is the thing that it needs? So it needs a snack bar.callback. Okay. And a snack bar.callback has two parameters. which I don't really care about. So I'm just going to call them X and Y, it looks like. Oh, I do have to do the other way. Okay. So new stack bar dot callback on dismissed. So that's when it's done. And at that point, I can do this. So I would just need to provide it a callback, and that callback will be invoked when it goes away. Okay, so again, in here, I've got a crash. Why do I have a crash? It says I've got a null that I didn't handle. Oh, this needs to be equals null. Still there. Oh, because I haven't checked that the message ID is actually null. So, because the map can be null, and the message could also be null. So, boop, boop, boop. Few levels of checking. Where's stack bar? Oh, because I have to check that it has at least one, and messages dot size is greater than 0. So back up to working after fixing some last cuts. So if I'm trying to do this switch, right, you can see that there's some code both in the view model and in the activity that's actually pretty general. I could probably reuse it on more than one activity. So I asked you earlier to kind of have your thinking cap on as to how we could extract this and make this reusable. What are your thoughts?
Well, things I can really think of are static.
So forget about static.
Make another class that extends view model, or
something.
Maybe what do they call nesting a class inside?
Nesting a class. Yeah, I could do something like that. I don't want to do static. Forget about static. Static's a bad idea. That causes a lot of problems. But I could create another class. In general, I could create another class and move this code into the other class. Okay. Now, one thing I could do is I could make that a base class for my view models, right? I could say, hey, let's make a new base class for my view models, and now all my view models extend from this base class, and then in theory they have that code. The problem that leads you into is, well, there's two things. First of all, remember there's actually two base classes already to choose from, Android view model and view model. So I have to choose one of those, right? If I'm making a base class, I have to make it either a subclass of Android view model or view model, right? And if I make it a subclass of view model, now everything's a view model. If I make it a subclass of Android view model, now everything's an Android view model, right? There's a problem there. The other thing that tends to happen when you're adding base classes, they tend to accrue features that just kind of don't go together. And that they tend to cause problems down the line, okay? I would not recommend doing that, even though it might look good right now, okay? So, what I would say is just to make a class, and then from there, to figure out how to put it back in. Does that make sense? We just make a class, it's not a subclass of anything, move the code over that we need, and then we figure it out from there. Okay? So if I'm going to make a new class, maybe I'll put it under utils. And let's just call it messages. Or be a better name. Message container. Let's call it message container. Okay? So if I'm making this message container, things I know is I know that anything that's working with this, this set is going to need to have that map, and it's going to need to have that list of snack bar messages as well. I did wrap these both in a live data, but one thing to consider, which might make our life easier, might not, can I put all of this stuff into one live data? Probably shouldn't, because error messages and snack bars, I still would like to keep those separate. Okay. So I have kind of two ways I could do here. I could actually make two utility classes. I could make a snack bar message container and an error message container. Or I could somehow kind of try to figure out both of those together and have them both have their separate live datas, right? But I think maybe what the best thing to do is to go ahead and make two instead of making one, right? That way, again, they're as reusable as possible, right? So if I say, let's refactor, let's rename. So I'm actually going to have an error message container and a snack bar message container. They're both going to deal with both of those separately. Okay. So error messages. All right, internally to it, private map string integer, and this would be the messages. Since I've split them up, I don't need to disambiguate what kind of messages they are. So messages, and make myself a constructor for this class. Messages is equal to a new hash map. In fact, I can maybe say both of these. That's fine, I'll leave it as that. So I've got a new hash map, and I might say public void public's string char sequence. Yeah, public char sequence get messages, right? If I kind of think about the interface you need to have, we need to get a message, and we need a public void set message. Does that interface make sense? So this is just a container for those error messages. Okay. So, and I'm saying that it's a map between their keys and values. Okay. So in terms of the setter, I still need a key. So string key and string res integer message ID. Actually can probably be lowercase int because it is required. Okay. So you can set a message. Setting message now is actually really easy. Messages dot put put the key, put the message ID. Okay. What I can do in terms of the get, I can kind of pull over the code that I wrote in the fragment, as it turns out. Where I say, let's make that. This can't be null anymore. I loop through the messages. Oh, I can't do that because I need a context. But I could if I passed one. have a context, then I can do the translation and then return the result of that. Does that make sense to everybody? A nice container for that code that I might otherwise have to repeat.
Well, we'll call this some of the activities anyway, so we'll have the context.
Yeah, so I can call maybe this side, I can call set message from the view model, and I can call get message from the activity. Because I kind of need to actually talk to both, right? So maybe I work it around this way. And it's nice here, I can easily say, okay, we're just going to construct the hash map at the beginning, and I can even mark that final, because it's never going to get reassigned. And that way, I don't have to worry about it ever being null in here. Okay? So error message container is a start. I think that's going to be most of what I want to do in there. Let's think about the other container. So on the side of, I close the thing I want to keep open. On the side of the snack bars, remember I had that as a list, private list. List of integers, and that was the messages. Okay. I think I'm running short of time today. Public. Okay. So you kind of see where I'm going with that, is I would make a container to just kind of hold on to the list of snack bars, make a container to hold on to the error messages, and that way you can kind of put the code in one place. And we'll just have to kind of finish this up on Monday. So just to kind of summarize what we talked about, remember on Thursday we kind of talked about why we want to do this, why we want to do this localization, why we want to do these translations. I showed you the video about different things that come up and things we have to solve, and we're working with that, and it's more than just, hey, change this text to this other language. There's a lot of other things that happen. I showed you how to use the translation editor to kind of start putting in the Spanish strings. We did that with Google Translate. And so we kind of got that process started. Where I left off is we were working with the view models, and I kind of got on a bunny trail. I pushed up the finished version of that, but then I pushed up also a refactored version, because at the end of the day I kind of found out maybe that was maybe a wrong path to go down to, so I've kind of rolled that back, worked back to what it was. So you can look at that in the movie list example if you haven't seen it yet. That's kind of where I ended up just using integers and not worrying about those classes that I'd kind of tried to create.